Good evening and welcome to the Dixon Historic Theater. I am Dr. David Hellmich, President of Sauk Valley Community College and the moderator for tonight's District 37 Illinois State Senate Republican Primary Candidate Forum sponsored by Discover Dixon. The election is March 19th with pre-election day voting open now. Our candidates in ballot order are Li Arellano, Tim Yager, and Chris Bishop. Candidates, thank you for having the conviction and courage to run in this important election. The candidates have agreed to listen respectfully to each other without interruption, have agreed to respect time limits, and have agreed to refrain from shenanigans all too common in national candidate forums. Members of the audience, given that we are all courteous Midwesterners, please turn your cell phones to silent and limit your reaction to polite applause after candidates have spoken. Do not interrupt the candidates while they are speaking. The candidates will be given a prescribed amount of time for each segment of tonight's forum. It is important for the candidates and our audience to understand that I will ask the candidates to stay within the allotted time. As a moderator, I will let the candidates know when their time has expired. The forum will proceed in 3 phases. First, opening statements will be given by each candidate in ballot order. Each opening statement will last no more than 3 minutes. Second, I will ask the candidates questions, beginning in ballot order and rotating this order with each question. Responses will be held to 1 minute per candidate per question. Finally, after about 45 minutes, closing statements will be given by each candidate in ballot order. Each closing statement will last no more than 2 minutes. Candidates, let's get started. In ballot order, Lee, you have the opening. You have no more than 3 minutes for your opening statement. Proceed.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for coming out and be part of our election process. My name is Li Arellano. I'm a father. I'm a husband, father of 4. Husband, my wife Jamie's here tonight. She's a RN right here at KSB Hospital in town. I'm also an Army engineer. I joined the Army over 20 years ago. I'm still actively drilling. I joined because of 9/11. My country came under attack and I wanted to do something about it and replay the blessings that it had given to me and my family. I'm also a small business owner. I own a number of small businesses, been active in that in the corporate world. I opened my first store when I was 26. I had paid off my first starter home when I was 25, immediately mortgaged it, and opened the Jimmy John's right here in Dixon. In 2008, the doors opened. I learned a lot. I've been in the business world a long time, but being an entrepreneur and a small business owner is a whole new window into taxes and regulation and leadership that I had to learn and adapt to. And that helped me in the next part of my resume, which is just under 10 years ago, you here in Dixon entrusted me to lead what would become one of the greatest projects, endeavors that Dixon had ever embarked on. In a state well known for its corruption, number 2 in the whole country, behind only Louisiana, unfortunately for a brief moment, Dixon stood out. And we needed to figure out as a community how to turn our ship around, how to get our finances back in order, how to do ethical reforms, corruption fighting, financial reforms, how to rebuild our public works, how to rebuild trust and faith in government, not so much that we get complacent and it happened again, but enough that we could be functioning and turn our city around. And if you go through Dixon now, you will see the results of that. I was honored to be given that leadership by the voters of Dixon. If you go through town now, you will see the results. Multiple years we set records and then beat our own records for the amount of infrastructure, road work done. Our tax rates have been falling. When I got into office, we were tied with Sterling among our comparables for the highest rates in our region. And there's a reason for that. The corruption tax is real. When I took office, the IRS forensic auditors gave us a graph of what had been stolen from Dixon over 20 years. And if you looked at that graph, it started like a lot of thieves do. It started with what, in the government world, I guess, was a little bit of money. I certainly thought it was a lot, but then it moved into the hundreds, thousands, and finally in the millions per year. And if you look at a graph, when we were putting together the finances of what our tax rates were doing, of what our borrowing was doing, they perfectly mimicked each other. And now I'm proud to say Dixon is on track to be completely debt-free by 2038. That includes public safety pension debt, bonds, general obligation, everything. Our city has a new future, and I'm proud to have led that. I want to take that experience down to Springfield, where they desperately need it as well. My name's Li Arellano. I ask for your support once more as we turn our state around just like we did in Dixon. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Tim, you have no more than 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Hi, I'm Tim Yager, and I'm from Geneseo, Illinois. Born and raised on a family farm. My dad was a hog farmer and a grain farmer, and I'm happy that after high school, or college rather, I was able to move back there and work in the telecom industry. I had a 20-plus year telecom career, ended up running a public company and doing a turnaround for another wireless company. And then since 2014, I've been farming full-time, living my dream of farming. I've been married to my wife, Kelly, for almost 36 years. We're high school sweethearts. I've got 4 adult kids and 5 grandkids. 2 kids live in the district and 2 grandkids live in the district, and my parents still live in the district, so I've got deep ties to the 37th district. And as I said, I'm a 6th-generation farmer from Geneseo. In terms of my background, I'm on the Henry County Board. I serve on the Finance Committee, and we've lowered our tax levies the last several years. I also serve on the Planning and Zoning Committee, which are important as we think about all the issues facing farmers today, whether it's zoning on windmills or solar or CO2 pipelines. We've been on the forefront of that in Henry County. Additionally, I serve on Darren LaHood's Ag Advisory Council, and I'm happy to do that. And I think it's because of the leadership I provided there that Congressman LaHood has seen fit to endorse me for this seat, and I'm thrilled to have his endorsement. And last, I'm also on the Illinois Farm Bureau Board. And again, I think because of the leadership I've shown through the Henry County Farm Bureau, I'm thrilled that I have the the Illinois Farm Bureau endorsement through their Activator program, and I'm thrilled to have that as well. When it comes to the issues, I think it's important to tick them off real quick. I'm pro-life. I'm very pro-Second Amendment. As a farm kid, I've been around guns my whole life. Springfield Armory is in my own backyard. They're supporting my campaign. If you know firearms, you know Springfield Armory. I'm for local control of schools. As a farmer, I support landowner rights. And when it comes to military, my wife was an Air Force brat, and my daughter is a federal probation officer. She just got married in December to a Marine who is now a Geneseo police officer. So when I say support the blue, it's a little more than a tagline. It's family for me. I've got a daughter and a son-in-law carrying guns to work every day. And it's time the state of Illinois backs the blue and supports safety for our communities. And there won't be a bigger advocate than me for that. And I'm thrilled that I have the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police endorsement as well. And then last, immigration. Clearly we have a problem in the nation and in the state of Illinois. It's the federal government's responsibility to secure the border, and they've let us down. And I think that's why Trump is gaining such momentum, is because he wants to secure the border, and that's what we need. And I want to go to Springfield to end the sanctuary city status of Chicago and the sanctuary status for the entire state of Illinois. And I'm asking for your vote on March 19th. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Chris, you have no more than 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. In 2015, I had 0 children. I was a teacher at the local junior high, and I was a wrestling coach at Dixon High School with a team that was about 500. Something else that happened that year was I was elected to my first term on city council here in Dixon. Little look into the past or recent history of the city of Dixon. As already mentioned, there was a $54 million embezzlement that had occurred, but the person that caused that embezzlement was behind bars. The city had been awarded over $40 million, and that's what situation the city of Dixon was in when we sat down and took our seats. Fast forward to the end of my term. We transitioned to the managerial form of government, which we now have. We passed balanced budgets, and we also negotiated contracts with the unions that work for the city of Dixon. During that time period, the wrestling team that I talked about earlier took its first state trophy home in program history. We had 2 assistant coaches win Coach of the Year. I was fortunate enough to win Illinois Coach of the Year. I earned a master's degree in kinesiology during that time, and God blessed me with 2 children. What I learned during that time is with the right people around you, heading towards like goals, you can accomplish a lot. And I've taken that, and I've used it in my second term. Since I've been back on the city council, we've had housing development, retail development, manufacturing development. We've looked at our pensions and the liability that was there, and we bonded out. So shortly after my kids get out of high school, the city of Dixon should no longer have debt on their pensions. Currently, I'm on a committee that is working on a comprehensive study and a comprehensive plan of the city of Dixon, so for the next 20 years, we continue growth. What I would like to do for the 37th is continue the work that I've done as far as working with others, leading, and bringing a voice to the people of the 37th. So with that, I just say thank you to those folks that came out. Thank you for those that are watching. And I look forward to the discussion ahead.
Thank you, Chris. We will now move to questions. I will begin in ballot order and rotate this order with each question. Candidates, please hold your responses to 1 minute per question. And if I need to repeat any question, please let me know. And I will begin each question with a sort of overview of what the topic area is, and then go into the specific question. So we'll go with this one will be Lee, and then Tim and Chris. The topic is school choice and education funding. What are your views on school choice, vouchers, and charter schools, and how would you propose to balance these options with the needs of public schools in the Illinois 37th District? Lee?
First of all, I'm a huge proponent of school choice. I'd be a hypocrite not to be. Part of the advantages I've had in life are getting a good educational launch, including graduating from Faith Christian School here in the Sauk Valley and Grandy Tour. I think it's critical that kids have choices and options in terms of what works for them. So I'm a very big proponent of school choice. If you look around the country, there's places that it's been done poorly, and it can damage the public school system, and there's places it's been done very well, and it's actually improved outcomes both for those who get the chance to go to a private or parochial school and for those who stay in the public school system. So we're not looking to reinvent the wheel here. There's pilot programs and more established programs around the country that have done it and done it very well, including in the Midwest. And there's programs that actually leave more funding per student if done well for the public school system. And those are the ones I'd advocate for. And the African American Caucus in Springfield has also been a proponent of those. So I think there's some likely pre-built allies on the other side of the aisle where we're working together to get better outcomes for our kids.
Thank you, Lee. Tim?
Sure. I think when it comes to schools, as I said in my opening, I'm for local control of schools. I think that we elect school boards for a reason, and we need to let those school boards manage their schools. I think so often the state of Illinois and the federal government extort our schools into programs and efforts that they think are important, and oh, by the way, they don't fund them on top of that. And I think it's time we let our local school boards do the job that they were elected to do. I think using the Chicago public school system as a template for how downstate students should be taught is a mistake. When I'm fortunate I graduated from Geneseo High School. I had a great education. And I think the Geneseo schools and the Dixon schools and the Princeton schools and Rochelle school boards are much better equipped to educate our kids than the state. And I think that we need to allow those local schools to do the job of educating our kids.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
I think the question that needs to be asked for these programs is, does it cover every student's need? I've seen programs that do. We'd have to obviously vet those things out, but something that gets left behind in some of these programs are some of those folks that need service. If they're special education children, are they being serviced? Do we have the dollars amount in order to transfer and keep those with those folks? So if they do choose to go someplace else, they have everything they need to be successful. Public schools were brought up, obviously, in this conversation. I think one of the biggest things bogging public schools down are the mandates that come down on them. I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention it now. On average, there's 17 new mandates a year from the state. About 7 of those go unfunded. So what we've done is put our teachers and our schools in a situation where they're stretching resources time and time again, and that's one of the things we can focus on as legislators, is reducing that happening to those folks.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, the order for the second question will be Tim, and then Chris, and then Lee. The topic is financial sustainability of rural health care. Rural hospitals in our district are struggling. What strategies do you propose to ensure the financial sustainability of rural hospitals, and how will you support access to quality health care services for rural residents in light of these struggles? Tim.
It is a great issue in downstate Illinois and in the 37th. I think, the healthcare desert is becoming a term that people are becoming all too familiar with. It used to be for specialists we had issues, and now it's for just general healthcare that it's become an issue. And I think the state needs to do a better job of encouraging and promoting rural healthcare. I think so often they don't do a good enough job of retaining the Illinois expertise, and we're letting them leave. And I think some of that also gets to the insurance issues. I think when you look at the liability insurance that's out there for doctors, it's become prohibited. I know in the Quad Cities, a lot of medical care is available on the Iowa side that's not available on the Illinois side of the river. And that comes down to regulations. And then last, I think the state needs to pay their bills on time. In Henry County, we have a county-run healthcare nursing home, and it's not uncommon to be as much as 3, 4, and 6 months late on our payments from the state, and that puts us in a real bind. So the state needs to pay their bills on time as well.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
I think one problem we run into is the federal government and state government just not keeping up with things that are going on as far as inflation goes. One of the things that happens is Medicaid and Medicare, those rates aren't increasing at the level everything else is. And so some of that is coming to fruition, right? If you're not making enough money, if you're not getting the payment that you need, slowly you start to dip into those things. So I think a large part of that is taking a look to see what can happen on that level. Obviously, management is a big part of what happens in hospitals, but we're seeing this all over. So it's not one particular hospital. But as a legislator, I think the important part is sit down with those administrators in those hospitals and figure out what can you do for your district in order to put them in the best position as possible. We're not going to solve every problem through government, but we sure can help them get to the best place we can get to.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
Prohibitive mandates have already been mentioned, and that's a huge issue. The logistics of that are different in rural areas than they are in the city, and I think there's a lot of the city-based legislators, which due to the gerrymandered maps is most of them, who just simply don't understand those issues. So that's point one. I think that's a well-made point. Point two, and you're going to see this theme from me for a lot of my answers, anytime it has to do with care or costs, but we're paying Illinois for a half century of financial mismanagement. We have $7.5 billion plus worth of debt payments just for the mismanagement and mistakes of previous generations. And so healthcare is one of many, many areas, including cities, schools, go right down the list, where the state has put pressures, increased costs, cut revenue sharing, things of those nature to displace the burden on themselves because they don't have the money anymore. And so getting on a debt payment plan, getting that down, just like we put in Dixon, that's absolutely critical to properly fund rural hospitals and deal with those logistics.
Okay, thank you, Lee. The order this time will be Chris, and then Lee, and then Tim. And the order is Illinois' fiscal health. Illinois has faced significant fiscal challenges, including pension liabilities and budget deficits. What specific policies would you support to improve the state's fiscal health and ensure long-term sustainability? Chris?
Well, the governor talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I believe that we're looking at a deficit of over $721 million. So one of the things that we have to do is you can't keep growing the budget when the money is not there. And I think it's important to also note, we're all running for a Republican seat. We will be the minority down in Springfield. So if you don't cross the aisle and work with other people, you're not going to get that budget changed. So you need to sit down with those folks and talk about the reality of all those things that we have in that deficit, the programs people want to put together, and what's the most important priority list for the state. And once you get people on board, you can start to work down that list and figure out what's there and how we can put ourselves in the best position moving forward. I don't think there's an overriding theme where you can just cut everything out. I also don't think we can just pretend that it's not there. So working together once again to solve the budget issue is going to be the most important part.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
Well, first I'm going to start off on excess mandates. There's a lot of regulation that costs a ton of extra money. And depending on which group, nonprofit you're looking at, good government group, that adds anywhere to 10 to 20% of all the bills we pay, both at the local and state level. It's a huge factor. I'm really not overstating it. I saw the impacts directly while I was mayor. It's kind of shocking. Second is debt management. I already mentioned that. There's no way, absolutely no way, Illinois Illinois can get turned around overnight. We couldn't in Dixon, and the mountain wasn't as big to climb. So we have to, absolutely have to get on a debt management plan that is feasible. You have to do that whether you're a family budget in debt, whether you're a business in debt, whether you're a city in debt. And Illinois has just been feeding the beast for way too long and keep punting the hard decisions to the next generation. And last, I would talk about efficiency. You can't go into a single state department, whether that's IDOT or corrections or DCFS, and not have the state employees tell you how dysfunctional and inefficient it is. In the business world, we're religious about efficiency. In the government world, they just tax you more. We need to fix that.
Tim?
Yes, when I look at the state situation, clearly we have mismanagement on the spending side, but I think the other piece that doesn't get enough attention is on the growth side. You just look at the simple facts. We've made it inhospitable for people to want to live in Illinois. The amount of people I know that have left this state because of our tax policies is outrageous. And I think if we could retain our employees by providing a more, our residents by providing a more hospitable environment for them would go a long ways towards solving some of these problems. We need people to pay taxes. We lost 43,000 people last year in the state of Illinois. Those 43,000 people pay taxes. We've gained 35,000 illegal immigrants who don't pay taxes, who are getting free health care, and who are getting prepaid debit cards. Those are the kind of things we need to do. So expenses are important, but we need to keep the residents here, and the way to do that is provide an environment that is good for business and good for families.
Thank you, Tim. The next question will be on agriculture support. We will start with Lee. Given the significance of agriculture in our district, how do you plan to support local farmers and ensure the sustainability of our agricultural industry?
Yeah, I mean, this is a key question. There's 12 counties, partially or fully represented in the 37th. Fully half of them are in the top corn-producing counties in the nation, not in Illinois, in the nation. So looking at things like the estate tax, which have a huge impact on small businesses, and farmers are small businessmen, that's got to be something we address. That needs to be growing and adjusting with inflation, because inflation's been crazy. In terms of state support, a lot of ag is done at the federal level, but Illinois is one of the top 3 ag output states. We need to do a better job of marking that and supporting that. And certainly in the rural areas, that's another battle where a state senator from a rural region needs to make sure we're talking to the majority, who's largely in the urban areas, letting them know about those needs, whether that's the estate tax, whether that's the tax on implements, or whether that's how farmland's treated and all the regulations they're putting top down on how solar, wind, and all that other stuff is impacting land prices. So.
Thank you, Lee. Tim?
Certainly, Lee touched on one of them, which is the state. I'm thrilled that the Farm Bureau has been on the forefront of getting this state tax revised for Illinois farmers. They haven't kept up with the times in terms of what we need to do. And it's hard to have a multi-generational farm like I do, a 6th-generation farmer, if the government takes it all when someone passes away within the family. So I'm thrilled with the work that the Farm Bureau has done on that front. And then when I think about some of the other issues that are confronted with farming, you know, you don't think about it, but zoning is a big issue. I'm on the county board. I'm on the zoning committee. We used to have control as the Henry County Board over what the zoning was. And last year, the state government took it in their rights to decide, we know what's best for how we zone in your counties. And so if you meet certain requirements, there's nothing the county can do to prevent zoning. And I think that we need to get back to where local counties control the zoning that is affecting the farmers in those areas, whether it's windmills, whether it's solar, whether it's CO2 pipelines. The state needs to let the counties manage those issues, which will in turn provide a better environment for those farmers of the communities.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
I think the most important thing you need to do is obviously have a direct line to those folks that are affected. So Farm Bureau was already talked about. They're great. They're excellent advocates for the farmers, so you need to stay in close contact with them. Obviously, land rights of the farmers that have them, they have rights, and they need to make sure that they have them and the government doesn't overstep their bounds with what's going on. Another key issue, I think, for them is reducing liability, allowing other folks to be on their land without worrying about what's going to happen to them. I know sometimes talk about some of the water acts, people using access to different waterways going through across land, and if someone has an accident there, who is liable? That's one of the things that if we want access to other people's land, we have to understand that they can't be held liable for all those things that are there. So just creating a healthy environment in which we have our farmers be able to be viable, and then also listen to their needs as well.
Thank you, Chris. The next topic is economic diversification. And Tim, this will go to you first. How do you propose to attract diverse industries and businesses?
I think the first thing we can do, and I alluded to a little bit ago, but we need to provide a friendly environment for businesses and industry who want to be in Illinois. I think Illinois doesn't realize that we're up in competition with Wisconsin and Iowa and Indiana and Missouri. We need to provide an environment that is inviting to business, that's lower on regulation, that's lower on tax, and provides an environment where businesses want to come to Illinois, that want to provide good paying jobs for the residents of Illinois. And I think and I think those are the basic tenets we need to set up. I think so often we drown people in regulations and forms and processes, and we need to streamline the process so when a business wants to locate in Illinois, it's an easy and simple process for them to do. And that's what, you look at Caterpillar, who's leaving the state of Illinois. Why are they leaving? Because of our taxes and the regulatory environment. We need to make it a great state for businesses to be in.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
I think one of the things that we need to do is, once again, focus back on some of those young folks that are coming up. How do we keep them in the state? What programs can we put together in order to put them in a position to be successful? One of the things we see coming back more and more are the trades. We need to have more programs in local high schools that are pushing them towards the trades, agriculture. Of course, those folks that want to go on into the business world or want to get a degree, we need to support them. But I believe the more we build these programs up, the more people are going to see the value in where they've came from, and they're going to stay. We want folks to stay in the 37th district because we want our communities to continue to grow. So how do you diversify? I think we try to focus on who's here and what can we do for them to put them in the best position to go forward.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
Yeah, when you're talking about business diversity, you got to talk about the business climate. It's already been mentioned, but you can't beat the drum enough. Illinois is one of the most over-regulated states in the union. If you get into business, you will see that firsthand, especially if you've done business in other states. It's just dramatic. That means there's more lawsuits, more liability. That means there's higher taxes. We have the #2 highest property taxes in the country, behind only New Jersey. And if you're, say, for example, a small-time mayor trying to recruit an industrial employer, and their taxes here are going to be $400,000 a year, and in Tennessee they're going to be $150,000 a year, you can't take a few $100,000 of taxpayer money to subsidize them, certainly not for one and over again. And it's just hard to get people in that kind of environment. Overregulation has to be getting locked down, property taxes, the business climate, they're just huge factors. But finally, if you look at the governor's budget address last night, he proposed almost $1 billion new taxes primarily on businesses. Why would they come here when they know that's the direction the state's going?
Thank you, Lee. The next topic is natural resource management, and Chris, we'll start with you. How do you plan to balance the conservation of our natural resources, such as forests and waterways, with economic needs of the district?
I think, like everything we've talked about here, I think that's bringing the appropriate groups together and figuring out how do we make that work, whatever industry may need an area in which they have to develop, what comes behind that and how does that look? What are we doing specifically to the environment around it? We can't stop everything in order to stop progress, but at the same point to be cognizant of what's going on and bring those people to the table as you're developing ideas of whatever it might be and what you need to do. How's that conservation look without stifling something maybe new that it can come along the line?
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
I said this is going to be a theme, and it will be. I'm going to go back to it. Conservation efforts take money. That's something Illinois doesn't have. And I'm just going to be honest with you. As far as I'm concerned, we need to have a debt payment plan. That needs to come first. And as we start getting the savings out of that, then we can look at the things we can include, including conservation efforts, state parks. Certainly in our area here, we are blessed to have a number of state parks, state waterways, things like the Hennepin Canal. I mean, right here in Lee County, we have several. You go into Ogle, we have some. All those things take money, staff, and investment in pre-planning, intentional pre-planning, and then coordinating that with economic development and how you can use that to bring tourism and use those funds to make it sustainable. And Illinois just doesn't have that capacity right now. So one thing, and I'll end my comment on this note, we need to rebuild volunteerism. We're going to get a lot more done. Dixon's been blessed about having an incredibly active volunteer group for our festivals and our plans and our events in our chamber. We need that to buy us time while we get the state on the right track.
Thank you, Lee. Tim?
Yes. I think as a farmer, conservation is critical to me. Farmers have been brought up to be stewards of the land and stewards of the resources that God has provided us. And I think it's important for us to continue to do that. And when I think about the state as a whole, I think we need to pick our priorities, but certainly we can't discard the conservation efforts of the state. When I look at the Hennepin Parkway along the canal, what a treasure. The state spent the money building it and investing in it, and they've let it deteriorate. And I think it's going to be cheaper to maintain these than to let them go into disrepair and then to try to come back and fix them. I think the whole process is part of the balancing act that we don't do in Springfield right now. The budget we have at almost $50 billion of revenues. It's how we spend it. And certainly we can't just abandon the conservation efforts in the state. And I think that we can certainly make that fit within the confines of that budget.
Thank you, Tim. The next topic will be renewable energy, and we'll begin with you, Lee. Do you support permits for wind and solar projects if that is what the landowner chooses to do with their property? And do you support House Bill 4412, also known as the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which aims to transition Illinois to 100% renewable energy by 2050 with a focus on job creation, environmental justice, and community empowerment?
First, I'd like to say I'm a huge proponent of personal property rights. It's one of the things our nation is founded on and made us successful. That being said, we need to have proper zoning. I know that's been mentioned a couple times before, and pre-planning that goes into it. One of the things we saw locally is that as the government injected a whole bunch of subsidies and monies into that particular industry, they came swarming with their lawyers and their planning before our counties could update zoning to reflect that. And so some of the most prime agricultural land that was generating tons of development and jobs in our region came under duress. And that's a problem because, as also was mentioned tonight, the state then turned around and took more control out of Chicago and Springfield for what happens in Lee County and DeKalb County and LaSalle County where we're producing. So that's got to get turned around. And finally, to close on that note about that bill, they went about it all completely wrong. It was an incredibly expensive way to do it. I support the idea of us being energy independent. I certainly don't want to go to war over oil, but the way Springfield went about it was wrong.
Thank you, Lee. Tim?
I certainly support renewable energy. I think it's an important component going forward. In terms of the specifics of that, no, I don't support being along those lines by 2050. I fall in the camp of all the above. I think trying to do anything with wind or solar and thinking you're going to be able to rely on that exclusively in this state by 2050 is naive. I don't think that's possible. I'm thrilled that the state last year finally got through the small nuclear plants. I think that's going to be a key component of our energy future going forward, and I think that's certainly a big step in the right direction. When it comes to the specifics of those, I do think that landowner rights are critical. I think that if a landowner wants to put in a solar or a wind farm, I think that's well within their rights to do so. But again, I think that's where the local zoning becomes a critical component of that. Running that out of the state of Illinois in Springfield because of their predetermined guidelines is just patently wrong. The county should be involved in those decisions and have the ultimate control.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
I believe that local counties should be making this call with the landowners themselves as far as what they do with their own property. And it's already been stated that we'd like to see that shift go back to the counties. I'm all for biofuels, nuclear energy, good clean ways to get towards zero emissions if that's where we're going to, which it's a good goal to have. But I think cramming these things in such a small space and saying that we're going to be there by 2050 is putting a lot of pressure that I'm not sure that we need in order to get there. I think we work our way to it. When we find ways that work, you implement them and you take a step-by-step process. So causing inefficiencies and subsidizing to get to a point where we're not efficient doesn't work.
Thank you, Chris. The next topic is election integrity, and we'll begin with you, Tim. Do you believe Joe Biden was legitimately elected President of the United States in the 2020 election? Do you think Illinois has secure election procedures, and will you accept the results of this election?
I will start in reverse. Yes, I will accept the results of this election. And I do think we have integrity. You know, I sit on the Henry County Board, and I just got the report of the process that we've gone through in Henry County to ensure that our election counter is in order and those kind of things. And I know how seriously these counties take it. And they don't phone it in. You know, they recognize the important role that they play in elections. And so I feel confident that we're going to have integrity in this election. And I do believe Joe Biden won. Do I think there were some issues along the way? Perhaps there were, but I think he won. And I think that, fortunately for us, I think Trump is going to win this time around, and we're going to right a lot of the wrongs that have happened in the last 4 years.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
Obviously, election integrity is one of the main things that get talked about anytime you're coming to elections, and they should be, because everybody's vote is important. If you're going out to vote, that's one of the most important civic things you can do. So I think for integrity-wise, one of the biggest things we can do is having clerks going through and verifying the roll. Do these folks live in the place that the roll says they live in? Are they still alive? It's a very simple process, but it needs to be gone through every time we're having an election. Will I accept the results of this next election? Absolutely. The biggest thing moving forward that we need to focus on as citizens is getting our knowledge on those folks that we're voting for, and then making sure when we go out and vote, we're taking other people with us and making sure that we're informed on candidates. So moving forward, as far as voter integrity, to me, voter rolls are the biggest things you have to do and look into moving forward.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
Well, first of all, of course, I'll accept the results of the election. I certainly accept court rulings. In 2000, Democrats had to accept President Bush as their president. Some didn't like that either. In terms of voter integrity, I think we have more work to do. I'm a fan of voter ID. I think it needs to happen. I'm a fan of spot audits of ballot counting with hand counts. And there's some in the crowd that might feel uneasy with that. Let me tell you, we've seen Target get hacked. We've seen the Veterans Affairs Administration get hacked. We know right here in Illinois that Russia targeted Illinois election. So anyone who has so much trust in the system that they're not willing to put in new safeguards, that's not the right approach. That's not the right approach at all. That's part of how we got burned in Dixon, and that's how you get burned in ballot integrity. And as we move to the electronic world, we need to understand that cyber warfare and cyber attacks are a very real thing. They can be very successful, and we need to implement more safeguards so people taking part of our process can have faith in that system. And that is a legitimate concern, and I would push for that in Springfield.
Thank you, Lee. The next topic is partisan gridlock, and Chris, we'll start with you. In the era of increased political polarization, how would you work with members of the other party to address district and state challenges?
I think the first thing is you don't make anything personal. You're there for a job. Each one of you are there for the district you're there to represent. So if you keep it on that level, now it's about talking about issues from each district and which ones are mutual. And how do we sit down and figure out those problems in there? So I think when you focus on the issues at hand as opposed to the bickering or personal issues that come into politics, you can get something done. But you have to be open to listen to people. You have to share your ideas, but realize there's going to be pushback on the other side. But it doesn't mean you can't get something done. You have to be open to new ideas and thinking about what's the ultimate goal that we want to pursue and how do we get there. So I think having that mind frame going into things are very helpful.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
Well, in this one, I think I've already answered the question. I have a record. I'm proud of it. I worked with people who agreed with me, who wildly disagreed with me, and when the moment comes where you're on the same page as something, you move together on it, and sometimes you move together on it together and publicly, and that's fine. And when you disagree, and when the vote's done, well, that's the system, and you move on, you work with the system you got. And so I did that for 8 years as mayor. We've had fantastic results from it. I'd also like to note that there is pathways. Senator Win Stoller, who we're hoping to replace, he got a number of bills through, including a tax cut for small businesses that I saw directly here in Dixon. So there's a pattern there. I'm proud to have his endorsement. It was mentioned earlier, the nuclear bill that Senator Sue Resin got through. I'm proud to have her endorsement in this race as well, because they know we need people who have a history of getting things done, are willing to stand on principle, aren't going to sell out, but also know when it's time to work together to advance the cause and make our state better. And that's what you got to do. And then, as was mentioned, you move on to the next project.
Thank you, Lee. Tim?
Certainly, gridlock is a problem both in the state and the federal level. I think the important thing there is we have to work together on the issues we can work together. I'm not going to compromise my principles. I'm not going to change who I am. But at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of things we can do to work together. As I said earlier, I did a turnaround of a wireless company. Went in there, the company was completely distressed. You have a lot of competing factions when you have debt holders that want their money back. And you have to find consensus because you can't give everyone what they want. I've demonstrated the ability to go in, find solutions to get it done. Everyone's not happy, but we ended up with a great result in the end. And I think, how did I do that? You got to work twice as hard. I think we need people to go to Springfield who are prepared to roll up their sleeves and do the extra work it takes. When you're in the minority, it doesn't mean you can't get anything done. I just got to work twice as hard to get the things done we need to get done. And I think that's a big part of the problem that's going on down there.
Thank you, Tim. The next topic is road and bridge maintenance, and we will begin with you on this one, Lee. Rural communities in the Illinois 37th District often rely on roads and bridges for transportation and commerce. What specific plans do you have to address the maintenance and repair needs of our rural road and bridge infrastructure to ensure safety and connectivity for people and businesses?
Well, I think anybody watching probably knows what my answer is about to be. Same as when I hit any of those answers. Look, IDOT got hollowed out by freezes due to the lack of money and spending potential down in Springfield. So the answer is obvious. We have to get out of debt so we can properly invest in these things, especially in rural areas where the logistics cover long spans, cover a lot more waterways. It's a huge issue. IDOT Region 2 headquarters is right here in Dixon. I got to work with them a number of times, but I saw it firsthand. When you put a hiring freeze on your engineers and your construction workers for a long period of time, your institutional knowledge goes down, your capacity goes down, and we're dealing with the after effects of that in Illinois. And you do that for a half century, and the problems are disastrous. So we have to get out of debt, then we have to hire good people, rebuild the culture. It's not going to happen overnight, but the only way to do it is to take the long, hard road, get the start date moving, and start hitting targets. We got to get out of debt.
Thank you, Lee. Tim?
Certainly roads and bridges are a big issue in the state. Obviously with this campaign, I've hit most of the roads in the 37th district, it seems like, over the last few months, just as my competitors have. But they're critical to the infrastructure of the state. Farmers in this district rely on roads and bridges, and we need good roads and bridges so we can get our produce and our commodities to market so we can feed the world. And I think for the state to take the back seat on that is a critical mistake. And I think part of the solution there is we need to spend the road tax dollars for roads and bridges. That's what it's for. We need to quit robbing those dollars to solve pet projects for the Democrats. Those dollars are dedicated to the roads, and that's what we need to spend them on. It is important and imperative. We talked earlier about the economic development of the state. Having good infrastructure is a key component to attracting business to the state of Illinois, and we need to do that, and we can do that and should do that.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
You make it a priority. Once again, I was talking about earlier, the way that you sit down and get things done is what are priorities in different districts. And I don't think you're going to find anybody that's going to say that bridges and roads are not a priority in their district. So there you go. There's a win for a budget session is, hey, this needs to be up on our list because we need it to drive our economy, not only for the folks moving around here, but also the industry we have around us needs our roads. So as the state, you put that as a priority. You put a system in place in which when we get to a certain spot, that's when a road needs to be redone. And you come up with how that needs to look, and then you put the dollars there, because we all know that in order to get something done, it's going to take money. So I think you have to move forward in that sense, get everybody to buy in that this is one of our top priorities, and then make it one.
Thank you, Chris. The next topic is water and wastewater infrastructure, and we begin with Tim. Many rural communities in the district face challenges related to aging water and wastewater infrastructure. What measures will you implement to modernize and upgrade these systems to ensure access to clean and safe drinking water and proper wastewater treatment?
Certainly, it is a critical issue that people have safe water, and we have ways to handle the other end of the water situation. And I think that it's critical that we have the regulations in place to take care of those, but we also can't over-regulate. We need to look for smart solutions and allow for smart solutions to come along. There's new technologies all the time that are being rolled out, and we need to avail ourselves of those types of things. And I think that too often the state, it gets encumbered in their processes instead of allowing communities to do the things and think outside the box to come up with some of these solutions. And to Lee's point he made earlier, this is one of the byproducts of having a state that hasn't been fiscally responsible. It gets harder and harder to have the money to do these kind of projects. And let's be honest, we're talking about safe drinking water for our kids in their schools. There's nothing more critical, and that's why this state needs to get on the right track so we have the money and resources available to do that.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
Yeah, I think unfortunately a lot of times this is going to go on the municipalities. We've seen it here in Dixon ourselves. We've got a big project that's going to be coming up with some of the new state mandates that come down the line. And I think the big thing is efficiency. How do you put programs together that work? And I think one of the ways you get there is you sit down with those folks that run those facilities that are in there every day and really look at the mandates and look at the regulations we have on it and what do we need, what don't we need? How do we get to a point where these things can function efficiently and give us the clean water that we're looking for, but at the same point aren't hampering its operation? Because if you're putting in mandates that are actually slowing down the way that we're getting water, and before it was working just fine and everybody was healthy and the clean water supply was there, then we're hindering our own process by getting in our own way. So I think pulling back some of those regulations, once again, sitting down with those folks that are in the field and understanding what does it really take to get in the best place we can be, the most efficient way.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
Well, first I'm going to hammer on the state debt levels one more time. You all knew I was going to say it. It is the issue to solve anything finance related in Illinois. We got to get out of debt to solve it. But I'm going to spend the next 50 seconds telling you a little story about efficiency. So we had a water main break here in Dixon under the state highway right past the arch, over $1 million fix. And when it got ripped up and I went and checked it out and I talked to our public works guys, said, how old are those pipes? And Matt Heckman, the public works director, and the guys went and looked at it and came back and I said, we think they're about 100 years old. Oh, okay, is that all? And so I asked him, well, when was the last time IDOT was through? And 80s, 90s, somewhere on there. So there was a couple 20-year periods when those pipes were way past their life expectancy, when IDOT had already paid for traffic control, paid to rip up the roads, paid to repair it, paid to do resurfacing, and at no point at the state or local level had they coordinated to take a $200,000 fix, so then it became a $1.5 million fix. And ladies and gentlemen, you in Dixon lost about $1 million because nobody had bothered to do that.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, the next topic is broadband access, and we'll start with Chris. Access to reliable high-speed internet is crucial for economic development and quality of life in rural areas. How do you propose to expand broadband access in underserved areas of the district, and what steps will you take to bridge the digital divide between rural and urban communities? Chris?
I think one of the biggest things you can do is, as a community, different places, is one, call the providers and see what they can do as far as access. And then if you can sit down as a municipality and find a way to incentivize them to be there, that's how you bring them in. That's, I think, the most prudent way to be able to do that if they're going to come across. As far as a program specifically, I don't have one at this time, but I know as the city itself, one of the biggest things we've been able to do is have multiple providers come in and talk to you about what they want to do and give them free access. It's a free market, and let them play out the free market.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
Yeah, as Chris mentioned, that's something that we worked on. I worked on that directly. Originally, we thought we were going to have to apply for grants and take the government model, but we were able to ride with the free market, and it didn't cost anybody in Dixon anything, and it's going to bring competitive prices. So part of the answer is exactly that. You look at what the free market can do, and you push that to its max before you start spending taxpayer monies. Otherwise, all you're doing is competing with the free market and driving up the price. So once you get an idea of where the market's going to take it, that's where you look to, and sorry for the government lingo, folks, I apologize, the P3, the public-private partnerships, to figure out how do I get it to the parts that maybe are not cost efficient for the free market. That's your rural communities, that's your farm homesteads. You look at where we already have it, I-88, I-80, branching out from there, and then you only should be focusing on the last stretch where the market just won't bear the price, and then figure out what the government can do to help to make sure everybody has access to it. But I think schools and education are the key part where government has an interest, and then you branch from there.
Thank you, Lee. Tim?
This is an issue near and dear to me. We talk about it at our Farm Bureau board meetings often. I can tell you it's great that Dixon has service. It's great that Geneseo has service. I'm a farmer. Over half of the Farm Bureau board that I serve on in Henry County doesn't have high-speed internet. And so it's great that we talk these ways in a city like Dixon or Geneseo or Princeton, but to the farmers out there, they don't have access to it. And so the federal government has funded a program, the state's funded a program, and I'm proud to say that the Henry County Farm Bureau came along and supported one of the local telephone companies to put rural broadband to farmers' homes. They're talking, we're spending $10 million to cover less than 400 homes. But you know what? Those kids were trying to do homeschool teaching during COVID, and these parents were buying multiple cell phones just so their kids could teach. We take for granted broadband. To the farmers out there, it's not a luxury item, it's a necessity, and we need to provide ways to get it to their homes.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, the next topic is affordable housing and housing shortage, and Lee, will begin with you. The district is experiencing a significant housing shortage, particularly in terms of affordable housing options. What specific policies and initiatives do you propose to address this shortage and increase the availability of affordable housing, including strategies to address homelessness?
Yeah, this is a very good question. This is a huge challenge around the country. Certainly it was in Dixon and around the 37th. Number one, I'd start off with inflation. We have a lot of inflationary policies. They have smacked the construction trade huge, and anything that raises gas then double whammies it. So we got to get rid of inflationary policies. And I realize it's a very broad topic. I certainly can't tackle all of those things in 1 minute. But we have to drive down inflationary policies. Number two, the regulation level is a factor. There are things we have done at the local level to try to get out the most onerous that maybe aren't relevant to us, but you run into problems when they regulate everywhere as if it's a major urban city and then pass those costs to urban or rural and ex-urban areas. And third, you got to make it a more business-friendly climate because all those costs get factored into it too. If you drive up the cost of goods, then homes go up right with it. That's the answer. And the free market is getting bastardized by what the government is doing.
Thank you, Lee. Tim?
Certainly inflation is a key component of this. When you look at some of the money that was deployed after Biden was elected and the money that was handed out and the inflation that created resulted in a lot of the interest rate hikes that are out, all the interest rate hikes that are out there. And that's made affordable housing impossible for many families out there. And it's why people are staying in their homes because they can't afford to buy a new home. And so it has a trickle-down effect. And so you have perhaps seniors who aren't selling their home because they can't buy a retirement home because of the interest rates. And then and that all trickles down like a cascade. And I think that's a big part of the reason why the housing market has stalled. And I think if we get the economy back on track, we get inflation under control, you'll start to see some movement within those houses, the housing situation. And then I think we also need to confront the regulatory environment. I think when you think about the permitting processes in place and all those types of things, we need to streamline that process so that people get their homes built in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
I think the big thing is work with municipalities to set up ways they can incentivize developers maybe to come in, and even places outside of the municipalities that are there. But TIF districts obviously work for those things. You're able to bring that tax money in, help those developers put those things together. The other thing I think we need to do is, once again, goes back to job creation and putting people in the best position they can be in to get a higher paying job. Now, I know that doesn't solve for everybody and the people that are currently there, but that's not a piece that we can just let go by. We know inflation's there. We know that we've got things that are going on that we're out of our control. But what we do have control of is local areas, regulations that are there, helping those municipalities and those counties understand what they can do to help developers build these new communities and these new housings there. And then also, like I said, building a situation where we have new job creations, particularly the trades, would be a great spot to start off so we get people earning more money for themselves and their families.
Thank you, Chris. The next topic is leadership qualities, and Tim, will begin with you. What are your greatest leadership strengths, and how do these strengths distinguish you from your fellow candidates?
My greatest leadership strengths are being able to get people to follow along, see the vision we need to go down. As I said, I started a company. I was in my 20s when I started the company, ended up being publicly traded, employed hundreds and hundreds of people, created hundreds and hundreds of jobs. And you have to set a clear vision for where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. And I have the skills to do that. And I think that one of the ways you do that is by working hard. And I think that's a skill that's been lost, not only by the government, we've talked a lot about that, but it's also just a skill that's lost among the workforce. And I think we have a situation where we got to bring people along, provide leadership by example, and I think that's one of the key attributes I can bring that differentiates me. And I think that with the background I've had in the business community and the like, I think that those skills will translate well into the government world, and the leadership of working hard is going to be a key part of that.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
I think one of the key things to leadership is having the ability to rely on the other people that are around you. Give them the power to be successful. I'll tell a little story again. At one point, I was 1-20 as a wrestling coach, and I knew I needed to change because I was trying to do everything myself. So I found people that could handle things. We defined their roles so they understood what they were able to do and what they should be able to do, and it was my job to back off them. Come up with a game plan, put people in place that can do the work, and then allow them to do that work. That's how you get the most out of folks. And as a legislator, to me, what you need to do is find a staff that you can rely on that's going to put you in that position. And you need to find other people around you that are going towards a common goal, and then you work that way. So I think the biggest thing for me, my leadership skills, are finding people that want to do the work and have the intelligence to lean on somebody else when they don't know the answer.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
Well, at the risk of being the closing part of a leadership summit that we just did here, yeah, you got to, as a leader, you got to be able to identify the needs of your organization. You got to build a vision or join a vision, because it's not always about you. If there's something out there that you want to help push towards, joining that, building a team, and then working towards it. And from there, it's a matter of checking the results. You know, you want to look within your leadership team, see who's getting results, and put them at the next level. And that's where I'd offer myself forward. If you look at what I've done in the military, over 20 years of experience with the Army engineer, leading construction teams of Army plumbers, electricians, carpenters, doing multi-million-dollar projects. If you look at what I did in the business world and as an entrepreneur, building those teams into stores that were wildly outproducing the rural markets projections. And if you look at what I was able to do for the 8 years I was honored to be chosen as the mayor of Dixon, as we did one of the largest municipal turnarounds in U.S. history, I have a record that speaks for itself, and I'm looking forward to doing the same thing down in Springfield and joining that team.
Okay, the next topic, there really is no, or next question is really is no topic. It's pretty simple, and we begin with Chris. If elected, how will you connect with the community?
Well, I think the biggest thing is obviously going to those communities and spending time. You have to find folks that are in the know in each community and spend time with them. Obviously, you want to spend as much time with everyone that you can, but the district's so large, if you don't find those key contacts in there, you're just going to be going aimlessly. So coming up with a very organized way of how you hit different places, who those folks are that you connect with in the district as a whole. I'm very fortunate that I spent time as a school teacher. So I've dealt with everybody from very low economic status all the way up to folks that are considered kind of high society when I was in that job. So everybody is a person, and what you have to do is figure out what needs do they have? What does that community need? Can you meet those things and really try to keep a pulse on what's going on? And if you have the ability to help those people out, you do it, because you're representing the 37th district and all the people in it, not Republicans, not Democrats, everybody that's there.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
The first step is accessibility, whether that's office hours, whether that's traveling through all 12 counties and meeting with folks, going to events, having town halls. One area in the modern era we're blessed with, of course, is social media. I was rather infamous during my time in office of responding to messages and queries on social media, because that's where a lot of people go for information and contact now. But another key thing is working with your local leaders. And as a state senator, that's something that that's pretty critical. I mentioned earlier I'm proud to have the support and public endorsement of well over 24 local mayors and county level officials throughout the area. I mean, if you go through Lee County, the mayor of Sublette, mayor of Ashton, Franklin, Grove, past mayor of Rochelle, you could go right down the list. You got to work with the people that the local populace has chosen to represent them and make sure you're understanding those needs. So step one is direct accessibility with your voters and constituents, and then working with local leaders.
Thank you, Lee. Tim?
I certainly think the best way to connect with community is be visible and be present. I think so often people get elected, they work hard to get elected, and once they're elected, they disappear. I think we've all seen those kind of elected leaders who once they get into office, you can't find them anymore. They don't come to parades, they don't come to the dinners, the community service type functions. I'm running because I want to make a difference for the 37th District. The only way I can effectively make a difference for the 37th District is if I serve the entire 37th District. And the only way I can do that is to be out and about in the 37th District. And that's what I plan to do. I think when I think about my background as a kid growing up, that's what we did. We went to different towns all the time. And I plan on doing the same thing once elected. I think it's going to be important to be to every community. And I'm not naive. I can't be to every function. But I will be in every county, and people will know who I am, so I'm approachable.
Thank you, Tim. Let's move on to the closing statement. In ballot order, Lee, you have no more than 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. Well, once again, thank you everyone for coming out. I did my open statement talking a little bit about what we've done here and where we are. So now let's talk a little bit about the state of Illinois. Illinois has the #2 highest property taxes in the country, behind only New Jersey, as I mentioned. We have the 2nd highest pension debt in the whole nation, behind only California. We're the 2nd most corrupt state in the nation, behind only Louisiana, as measured by elected officials actually convicted and put away, including most recently Alderman Burke of Chicago, the longest serving alderman in Chicago's history. Mike Madigan, the longest serving Speaker of the House in Illinois' history, is probably not far behind. His chief of staff was just sent to jail. We have some of the most liberal gun control laws in the nation. We have some of the most liberal pro-abortion laws in the nation. We are leading things in areas that we don't want to be a leader in. And so the question I have to ask people is, have you had enough? In Dixon, we certainly had. We woke up and saw those newspapers and saw what was happening, and we were so incredibly angry, and we got incredibly active and changed it. And that is the way Illinois should be feeling. Just because it's happened over a course of a half century and people are getting apathetic or moving out of the state, that is not the answer. We should be just as angry about the debt levels and misfunction in our state as everybody was in Dixon the day they read that first newspaper article and saw what was happening. And if you've had enough, it's time to put the people into office who will do something about it, who will represent rural forces, who will represent fiscal sanity, who are unafraid to make the bold choices needed to turn it around. We did it here in Dixon, perfect case study, and if you drive down now, you're going to see economic development, roads getting done. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-Second Amendment, I'm incredibly against illegal immigration and for the proper legal path that produces better outcomes. I want to change the state and turn it around. We need to get out of debt. We need to give our children, my children, a better state than the path we're on right now.
Thank you, Lee. Tim, you have no more than 2 minutes for your closing statement.
So I get asked all the time, why are you running for state senate? And you're just going to be beating your head against the wall. You're in a super minority in Springfield. And I'll tell you why I'm running for state senate. I'm sick and tired of having friends leave the state of Illinois because of our tax policies. My own daughter had kids getting ready for school. She lived in the suburbs of Chicago. And when they saw some of the woke policies were in that school, my son-in-law said, I can't take it anymore. And they moved to Florida, where they don't have to deal with some of those issues. And so I'm going to the state. I want to go to Springfield to make a difference for the state. We have a great state, rich in natural resources, hardworking people, some of the best farm ground in the world, and we've let it be co-opted. I'm going because I want to make a difference. I'm doing what I've wanted to do since I was a kid, pushing tractors around my mom's living room carpet with my brother and farming the carpet. I'm farming. But you know what? My dad's 88 years old. And he just moved to town, and for the first time in 88 years, he has a different address. When Mom and Dad got married, Grandma and Grandpa moved out, Mom moved in. And they moved to town. And you know what? I'm thrilled to say my daughter's moving into that house. 7th generation entering into the family farming operation. My son is as well. And how thrilling that is. So why am I running? I'm running because my parents live there, my kids live there, I've got grandkids living there. It's a great state, and we need leaders that are going to Springfield. I'm not going for a better job. I've got my dream job. I'm going because I want to make a difference for the people of the 37th District, and I want to get this straight on the right track.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
Yeah, first off, I want to say thank you to everybody that came out. Obviously, getting to know us a little better is a positive thing as you're deciding where to vote. And I can tell you there's 3 things I do whenever I'm trying to have success. Number 1, come up with specific goals. What are we trying to obtain here? Number 2, come up with a plan. What's it going to take to get there, and who do we need to get involved? And the third one is have the work ethic and the discipline to stick to the plan. So that's what I'd like to bring down to Springfield. Some different areas that I'd like to cover going down there. 1, the Constitution of the United States, as well as the Constitution of Illinois, are there for a reason. We should follow them. Number 2, the Safety Act. Our law enforcement is having problems with this. We need to address that. But it's not just the law enforcement themselves. Our judicial system is also having an issue. Whether it be the backlog of cases that are sitting there being processed, or also our counties losing money into hundreds of thousands of dollars in processing fees that the Safety Act has taken away from them, that we will end up having to spend in tax money to replace. And the last thing are school mandates. I already brought them up. We keep stretching our resources more and more. I think it's important that if a mandate comes from the state of Illinois, they better fund it. In fact, I think mandates shouldn't come from the state of Illinois. They should come from local school boards. That's been addressed here tonight, and I feel strongly that that's where that power should lie with making decisions on curriculum and things that happen in our schools. I just want to bring common sense back to Springfield, and I'm hoping some of you people feel the same way and can support me on my trip to do that.
Thank you, Chris. That concludes tonight's candidate forum sponsored by Discover Dixon. Candidates, nicely done, and thank you again for having the conviction and courage to run in this important election. Thank you to the Dixon Historic Theater and all the volunteers who made tonight possible. Now everyone, please participate fully in our democracy by voting March 19th or on the pre-election day, voting open now. Good night.